Does this boy have a death wish? That's the only thought in Arima Kihei's mind as his hand tightens around his sword. Across from him stands a boy, just 13 years old. Big, sure, but still a child. And yet, he's challenging a seasoned samurai. Kihei is a storied warrior, well-versed in the Shinto-ryu school, an expert in dealing death on the battlefield with a spear or a sword. Earlier, he'd entered a fenced-off clearing near Hirafuku village and put up a notice in town, inviting any worthy warrior to come and engage him in a shiai, a competitive duel. Then this boy, barely in his teen years, kicks open the fence, wielding nothing more than a wooden staff.
Are you Kihei? Well, let's duel!
Kihei grits his teeth. He'll cut this insolent child down, like he's done so many times before. What kind of fool brings a staff to a sword fight? He reacts instantly, unleashing one of his favorite strikes, fast, precise, and meant to end the fight in a single blow. It's the kind of attack that has finished countless opponents before, but this time, it misses. Not by much. The blade slices through the air just fractions of an inch from the boy's body. That should have been enough to end it, enough to scare him off. But instead of retreating, the boy keeps moving forward. At first, Kihei assumes it's desperation. Then he realizes the boy is closing the distance on purpose, stepping in tighter and tighter. Kihei no longer has the space to swing his sword properly. The advantage he's relied on vanishes in an instant. Before he can adjust, the boy lunges in, wraps his arms around Kihei, and locks him into a bear hug. Before Kihei can reach for his tanto blade and execute a close-quarters attack, the boy goes low. He forces his shoulder hard into Kihei's gut, wrenching the samurai off the ground and throwing him to the earth, head first. Kihei tries to get back up, but the world's spinning. Through his foggy vision, he can just about make out the boy picking up his staff and stepping closer. There's a deafening crack, then searing pain explodes across his forehead. And the boy doesn't stop. He strikes the prone Kihei in the head with his staff again and again, cracking skull, covering his robes in flecks of red and the spatter of tiny pink chunks. Kihei's skull gives under the force of the boy's last blow, exposing glistening brains to the uncaring sun. The samurai vomits a geyser of blood and dies as the boy cleans off his staff and, with no ceremony, leaves. This is the first duel of Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest and most brutal samurai duelist in all of history, or as he's known in Japan, Kensei, the Sword Saint. Some people are born in the wrong generation, but Miyamoto Musashi, born Shinmen Musashi no Kami Fujiwara no Genshin, was not one of them. When he was born in 1584, the warlord Oda Nobunaga had begun the brutal task of unifying the country after centuries of conflict, only to be assassinated 2 years later. It was the dog days of the Sengoku period, a chaotic and violent time. The perfect forge for creating a chaotic and violent man. Battle was in Musashi's blood. He'd been born to a noble family in the rural village of Miyamoto, with ancestors in an offshoot of the famous Akamatsu clan of the Arima province. His grandfather was a samurai, and his father Munasai was a samurai, all who'd worked in service of great and powerful men and their causes. And that, by birthright, made Musashi a samurai too, a revered class, and the only ones in Japan permitted to carry 2 swords on their belt, one long and one short. In an earlier era, Musashi's background might have afforded him a charmed life, but during the bleak years of the Hideyoshi campaigns, he was left a young samurai without a master, a Ronin. His mother had passed away, and his father had abandoned him when he was only 8, leaving him in the care of his uncle, a priest. We'll never know why the lust for combat ran so fiercely in young Musashi's blood, whether it was something he was born with, or a force that entered him like the spirit of a vengeful Oni. But what we do know is that when Musashi began his quest to be the greatest duelist in history, he never stopped. Brutalizing Kihei is just a warm-up for young Musashi. Soon after his first kill, he begins his warrior pilgrimage, a tradition for Ronin. He travels the Japanese countryside, seeking knowledge of new techniques and worthy opponents to defeat. Musashi would later write that to be a samurai is to master the art of death, to live every moment prepared to die, and to achieve complete focus in battle. Word has started to spread of the young Ronin who cuts down anyone in his path, despite now being only 16 years old. Akiyama, a samurai of the Tajima province, sees young Musashi as little more than another potential notch on his belt. A samurai's honor is his pride and joy, and that honor can be counted in duels won. And this is more than just pride for its own sake. An honorable samurai with a reputation for victory is more likely to be noticed and hired as a retainer by a powerful lord, guaranteeing wealth and security. He approaches Musashi in Tajima during his wanderings and challenges him to a duel. This should be over quickly, he thinks as he draws his long sword. They both stand still for a tense moment. Neither wants to be baited into making the first move. He who attacks first, if he fails to kill his opponent immediately, almost always pays the price. But despite Akiyama's reputation as a capable strategist, his pride nags at him. He can't be seen as intimidated by some whelp who could barely fill his father's boots. Akiyama charges in with a savage war cry and swings his longsword, but Musashi's bold fighting style throws him off. He ducks away from the blade and moves in closer, eliminating whatever range advantage Akiyama's weapon could have given him. With one stroke of his sword, Musashi opens the rival samurai's belly, spilling his guts. As Akiyama falls to his knees, already dying, Musashi keeps walking. His second win, his second kill. But it is a fight so insignificant to him that it will later occupy only one line in his book on the art of the samurai, writing simply that, "When I was 16, I struck down an able strategist, Tadashima Akiyama. Far greater battles are still to come." Musashi would go on to develop a style that would define his life and swordsmanship career. Niten Ichi-ryū, the school of the strategy of two heavens as one. The key belief of this style, which Musashi invented himself, is that a samurai must always be holding both his long and short sword in battle. Not only will this allow you to face multiple opponents at once, it will also allow you to engage opponents at any distance. During the start of a fight, or if your enemy tries to escape, you can strike at them with the longsword. If the enemy slips past your guard and gets close, you have your short sword ready to defend and strike back. This technique would serve him well in his next challenge, when he took part in one of the most brutal battles Japan had ever known. The Tokugawa shogunate began rising to power, and the Edo period truly began in the year 1600. It's generally believed that Musashi, at 17 years old, fought in the Battle of Sekigahara under the banners of the losing side. If Musashi wasn't made of iron before this battle, this was the incident that forged him into tempered steel. It's one day of pure hell on the Sekigahara battlefield. 30,000 men will die as Musashi fights to stay alive. He and his allies were vastly outnumbered by a superior force here. Musashi, perhaps for the first time in his life, was forced to fall back into retreat and spend days on the run. After the vanquishing of the Western Army, Ieyasu's forces, the victors, decided that they didn't want to leave any survivors who could fight back against their new regime. They sent out detachments of soldiers and empowered vicious bounty hunters to hunt down anyone who'd been loyal to Ashikaga on the battlefield that day and put them to the sword. Luckily for Musashi, he laid low enough that he could avoid anyone hunting for him. Musashi chose to live more like a beast than a man. He often remained away from society, traveling the wilderness in blistering heat and bitter cold, practicing kendo, the way of the sword, almost constantly. He pushed away all human connections. He never bathed or changed his clothes, knowing that in those times he would be vulnerable to attack. Musashi was a man who lived to kill and was ready to die at any moment. It wasn't just Musashi's skills that terrified his opponents, though. To them, he even looked like a demon. Musashi was said to have suffered from eczema, giving his skin a red and blotchy appearance. He never once cut his hair, giving him the tangled mane of a wild man. It must have seemed almost like some evil spirit or vengeful zombie was lunging at you with two blades, ready to take your life. In 1604, Musashi, now 21 years old, rolls into Kyoto, then the capital of the nation. His avant-garde dueling antics have already made a name for him here as a deadly Ronin on the rise. Members of the proud Yoshioka warrior clan, once the personal swordsmanship instructors to the shogun, want to put this mad dog down. Years, perhaps even decades earlier, Musashi's father had faced 3 Yoshioka swordsmen in duels, defeating 2 of them with skill and precision. Now he wants to see if he can beat his old man's record. His quest brings him first to the swampy depths of Rendai Moor, just outside the city, where he faces Yoshioka Seijiro. Seijiro is the proud head of the family, unsheathing his deadly ancestral sword. His retainers, also armed, standing behind him. Rain pours down from the sky, soaking the master's robes and hair, though his samurai topknot remains immaculate. Musashi is doing something strange, though. He's not using his iconic two-sword style. In fact, he's not carrying a real sword at all. Instead, he's armed with only a wooden training sword. He doesn't want to just defeat the Yoshioka. He wants to humiliate them, to destroy their pride, to wound their honor.
What's the matter, Seijiro?
He asks, voice plain and even.
Not afraid, are you?
That does it. Seijiro rushes in. The family head swings for him, but finds nothing but air. Musashi responds by striking Seijiro hard on the shoulder with his wooden sword. Seijiro stumbles, and Musashi takes advantage, striking him and knocking him to his knees. With decades of generational wrath behind every swing, Musashi beats Seijiro senseless on the ground, bruising flesh, cracking bone. It isn't long before the proud lord is begging for mercy, and in the ultimate insult, Musashi grants it. He knows that letting this man live with the humiliation of this memory is a far crueler fate than giving him a warrior's death in combat. Seijiro's retainers load his broken body onto a makeshift stretcher and carry him back to his mansion, where he'll cut off his samurai topknot in shame. But this humiliation will harden Seijiro's students' resolve to battle and kill the upstart who had stolen their master's dignity. The first is Yoshioka Denshichiro, an impressive swordsman taught in the ways of kendo by Seijiro. He demands a duel with Musashi outside the city and won't take no for an answer. Musashi is more than happy to oblige him. They make an agreement. The two of them will cross swords outside the city yet again for the honor of the Yoshioka family. A good, clean, fair fight. At least that's what Denshichiro is hoping for. Musashi spends the morning relaxing while Denshichiro prepares for the duel. Denshichiro arrives punctually, but when the time for the duel begins, Musashi isn't there. It's half infuriating, half vindicating. Of course Musashi was a coward all along, he thinks. Of course he'd be content to attack a man far older than him, but would shrink away in fear when having to face a warrior his own size. Of course, he'd never have the guts or the honor to face a duelist of Denshichiro's caliber. The samurai exhales and lets his guard down. And then Musashi arrives. He doesn't give Denshichiro a moment to recalibrate, doesn't exchange a word, and before Denshichiro could remark on the insult of Musashi once again bringing that same wooden sword as before, it's already over. The wood connects with Denshichiro's forehead with an almighty crunch, and blood begins to leak from the samurai's eyes. He collapses to the ground, dead from a single strike. Musashi leaves as casually as he arrived, having added to the tally of Yoshioka humiliation. Clearly, the Yoshiokas realized this Musashi wasn't above dirty tricks. If he was going to pull the wool over their eyes like this, perhaps the best way would be to end his wretched life with a similar deception. They would have Yoshioka Madashichiro, who was little more than a boy in the middle of his training, challenge Musashi to a fight in the pines near the Ichijoji Buddhist temple. The boy would arrive with a gang of Yoshioka retainers, and when Musashi arrived, they would, together, cut him down. Musashi accepts the challenge, and it seems the trap has been laid perfectly. The gang arrives in the pines, hands close to the hilts of their swords, Madashichiro looking comical in his ill-fitting war attire. The second Musashi arrives, all swords will be drawn, and the fool will die a well-earned death. But, to none of their surprise, he doesn't show. The pines are still. Musashi must have sniffed out the plot somehow and decided to leave Kyoto for his own good before he was cut down. Still, they stick around, knowing the trick he pulled to murder Denshichiro. A wise choice on their part, or so it seemed. Musashi wasn't planning on arriving late. He was already there, lurking, watching their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now, that moment has come. Musashi lunges in, exploiting a gap in the retainer's formation. Before Yoshioka Madashichiro can even turn his head, Musashi's hand is already on the hilt of his short sword. He draws the blade and decapitates the boy in a single, fluid motion, showering himself and the surrounding retainers in a rain of blood. As the retainers draw their swords in shock and horror, Musashi grips and draws his longsword, adopting his signature style. Those who dare approach would need to brave the wild swings of his longsword, keeping a circle of distance around him. A few of those foolhardy enough to get closer saw their flesh cleaved by the tempered steel of his short sword. With the same ease with which he entered the fray, Musashi cut himself a path through the would-be assassins and fled into the pines. Never had the Yoshioka family's humiliation been so great, but Musashi had indeed beaten his own father's record. He had no need to remain in Kyoto any longer, and now he was ready to once again embark on his warrior pilgrimage, searching for ways to improve his craft and match up against more worthy opponents. Sometimes he slashes open their throats or bellies with his steel. Other times, he beats them to death with sticks or staffs or wooden swords. Of the around 60 duels that Musashi fights before he's 29 years of age, we know the names of only a handful. But despite his love of dirty tricks, psychological warfare, and unconventional dueling tactics, Musashi didn't have contempt for all the men he dueled. Some, in fact, he wanted to learn from. Okuzoin Doe was a priest at the Kofuku-ji, and he wasn't some defenseless holy man. Doe was a master in Hozoin-ryu, a traditional type of Japanese spear fighting. Musashi faces off against this man with a wooden short sword, no intent to kill him this time, and successfully parries the priest's spear thrusts before beating him into submission. In a rare change for him, though, Musashi remains at the temple and befriends Doe and the other priests, whom he enjoys talking with when he's resting. During his period at the temple, Musashi is extremely inquisitive, constantly asking questions about the spear fighting techniques and observing the priests during drills. Everywhere Musashi went, he tried to learn something, and depending on how you treated him, he could learn from you or school you. Musashi encountered a man named Shishido in 1607 who was an expert with the kusarigama, translated literally into chain sickle, a frightening scythe with a swinging chain and weight hanging from the end. Musashi was enough of a name now that warriors like this felt they had something to gain from killing him, so Shishido approached him with a gang of retainers and prepared for battle. Naturally, Shishido makes a show of it, flinging and whipping around his chain to show skill and dexterity, but Musashi doesn't feel like messing around today. Before the fight can even truly begin, he whips a dagger out of his robes and launches it at Shishido, piercing him through the heart in front of his confused and terrified retainers. But even though Musashi seems invincible, they're honor-bound to avenge their master's death. The retainers fan out around Musashi and attempt to box him in, but they're no match for his two-sword style. He doesn't even need to kill any of them. When faced with his skills, there's no other option than to retreat and leave their master's corpse laying in the street. Muso Gunosuke got a little luckier. He encountered Musashi while the master samurai was cutting wood, hoping to make himself a new bow. Gunosuke drew his sword on Musashi and challenged him to a fight, but in true Musashi style, he didn't use the axe that he was cutting wood with. Instead, he picked up a stick. When Gunosuke attacked, all fury and steel, Musashi avoided his blows and struck him on the head with the stick, scaring him away. Some say there would later be a rematch between the two that ended in a draw, but it's hard to tell the legend from the fact there. With so many foes so easily slain, Musashi was in search of a challenge. That's why he approached Lord Matsudaira, the head of a powerful samurai clan, and requested the opportunity to fight the strongest man in his employ. Matsudaira, morbidly curious after hearing Musashi's reputation, granted this wish, so long as the terms of the duel were non-lethal. The man he provided was a towering figure who fought with an 8-foot, 2.4-meter long wooden hexagonal staff. Musashi, of course, would fight with 2 wooden swords. The duel was held in Lord Matsudaira's library garden, and Musashi quickly took the advantage. Boxing the warrior in with an aggressive fighting style, he fought him up to the garden steps until the man fell on his back, and struck at him until he'd gained submission. The fight was so impressive that Lord Matsudaira requested to fight Musashi himself under the same terms, and was quickly laid out against the stone steps in the same fashion. But the Lord wouldn't give up so easily. He raised his sword and tried to keep up his noble attitude, but Musashi simply said the words, "Fire and stones cut," and with a single strike, smashed the Lord's sword in half. Lord Matsudaira having gained a personal respect for Musashi, paid him to remain at the mansion for a time and act as a swordsmanship teacher to him. Musashi accepted the request. He'd earned some time away from wandering. But the battle he's most famous for was still to come. If it could be said that anyone in the life of Miyamoto Musashi was his nemesis, the honor would have to go to another young samurai named Sasaki Kojirō. He was a revered swordsman who invented his own signature move, known as the swallow counter, which he'd created after observing the movement of a swallow's tail. Kojirō was so promising a warrior that he was made the retainer of a powerful lord named Hosokawa Tadaoki. For the first time in a long time, Kojirō did not seek permission to duel Musashi. Musashi sought permission to duel Kojirō. This permission was granted, and the terms of the duel were set. They would face off against one another at 8 a.m. on a small island near Ogura, and this was no easy matter. Musashi himself would later say that Kojirō was one of, if not the greatest opponent he ever faced, though nobody but Musashi himself could ever have predicted how that fight would ultimately go down. It's a rare thing for two men so equal in reputation to face off like this. Rumors immediately began circulating that perhaps Musashi would back out. Maybe his brutish tactics would fail against the more subtle and sophisticated techniques of Kojirō. The fact that, when the duel time came, Musashi was nowhere to be seen only served to reinforce this belief. An envoy of the officials waiting with Kojirō on the island was sent to the home of another samurai where Musashi was waiting and found him still in bed, asleep. They jostled him awake and gave him a jug of water to wash himself, which he instead drank, and made a beeline to the shore where a boat was waiting to ferry him to the island. The boatman couldn't help but notice that Musashi seemed incredibly calm, perhaps even still sleepy, his messy hair wrapped in a towel and his kimono sleeves tied up with paper string. Rather than stilling himself or dictating what could very well have been his last recorded words, he decided instead to do some woodworking. The boatman probably thought that Musashi had lost his mind when, despite having two swords tied at his belt, he seemed to be carving one of the spare oars on the boat into a makeshift wooden sword. That kind of thing might have worked against some petty bandit or novice, but not a warrior of Kojirō's standing. Kojirō, who had never met Musashi before this encounter, stood waiting on the island. He was as shocked as anyone when the boat docked and he saw his opponent climbing out of it, looking like some mad wild man, wielding nothing but a sharpened oar. Kojirō would make this quick and end the life of this legendary samurai who had clearly gone past his prime. He drew his sword and discarded his scabbard as Musashi ran in. The oar-wielding samurai said of the scabbard,
"You'll have no more need of that."
As he charged, Kojirō felt insulted. For all the talk of Musashi wanting this fight, the deranged duelist still wasn't taking this seriously. He would strike first and end Musashi with a single stroke of his blade. But of course, that was exactly what Musashi wanted. When Kojirō swung, Musashi pitched the oar upwards, knocking the subtle samurai's blade off course. Now, with the sharpened oar far above Kojirō's head, in the split second that followed, Musashi swung the weapon down with tremendous force and split open Kojirō's skull at the forehead. He fell to the ground immediately, felled by a single strike. The nobles officiating the duel could only stand back in stunned silence as Musashi turned, bowed to them, and returned to the boat. He was never defeated, not once, in every single duel he ever fought. Of course, his appetite for learning and excitement didn't end with duels. He returned to being a soldier again multiple times, besieging Osaka Castle with the Tokugawa forces. He took an adopted son, Iori, who would himself become a great warrior. After a brutal life as a wandering Ronin, in his latter years, the many lords of Japan began taking an interest in Musashi. He was invited to stay as a guest of Hosokawa Tadatoshi in Kumamoto Castle, an offer that Musashi took up, perhaps tiring of the constant movement his path had taken him on. He continued teaching his unique fighting style to students, while also focusing on his other passion, painting, which he sometimes did under his pen name Niten. He also took on metallurgy as a hobby, and in addition to his number of worshipful students growing into the thousands, he even made a company that created sword guards. A key part of Miyamoto Musashi's philosophy as a warrior is that one must learn the way of every profession if you are ever to truly understand your own. As a warrior, he was a terrifying demon, whether he was slicing you in half with a steel sword or crushing your skull with a wooden one. But in terms of curiosity and his thirst for knowledge, he was more like an inquisitive child, even well into his 50s and 60s. It wasn't until his time in the isolated cave, where he chose to note down a life's worth of battle wisdom into his enduring classic, The Book of Five Rings, that he finally found an opponent he couldn't defeat: cancer. He would pass away peacefully on June 13, 1645, but in death, he truly became the Sword Saint, and neither that nor the centuries that have unfolded since could even hope to dull Musashi's legacy as the greatest samurai who ever lived, learned, and killed in Japan.